Welcome to Lesson 4.4 of the Grant Architect course, where we explore one of the most commonly misunderstood concepts in grant writing. In this lesson, we focus on outputs, often called the widgets of your program because they are the tangible products you manufacture through your work. Outputs are the direct products of program activities, the countable things that result from what you do day in and day out. Understanding outputs and distinguishing them clearly from outcomes is one of the most important skills in logic model development and proposal writing. Many grant proposals fail review because applicants confuse these two concepts. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify appropriate outputs for your program activities, distinguish outputs from outcomes with confidence, set realistic output targets based on your capacity, and create measurement systems to track your outputs accurately throughout the grant period. Outputs are the direct products of program activities that you can count and document. They represent what your activities produce in terms of countable deliverables, regardless of whether those deliverables created any change in participants. The character of outputs is countable, tangible, and immediate. You can count them reliably, they are concrete and real, and they result directly from the activities you conduct. Number of workshops conducted, people served, sessions delivered, and materials distributed are all examples of outputs that programs commonly track. Outputs measure what we did, not what changed as a result of our efforts. This distinction is absolutely crucial for logic model development. Outputs track activity completion and service delivery, not participant transformation or improvement. Providing 50 counseling sessions is an output because you can count those sessions. Whether those sessions helped anyone improve their mental health is an outcome because it measures change. Control is a key distinguishing feature between outputs and outcomes. Outputs are within program control to produce if you have the necessary resources. If you conduct the planned activities correctly, you will produce the expected outputs reliably. Outcomes depend on participant response and many external factors, but outputs depend only on your own actions and implementation fidelity. The output-outcome distinction is fundamental and worth examining carefully with concrete examples from real programs. Output example, number of people trained. This counts who participated in training sessions that you offered. You control this number by conducting training sessions and enrolling participants who show up. Outcome example, change in participant knowledge after training. This measures whether participants actually learned something they did not know before. You can influence learning through quality instruction but cannot fully control whether learning occurs. Output example, sessions of counseling provided to clients. This counts service delivery volume regardless of results. Your staff conducts sessions according to schedule and you count them. Outcome example, improvement in client well-being following counseling. This measures whether counseling actually helped clients feel or function better. Many factors beyond your counseling sessions affect well-being. The pattern is consistent across all program types. Outputs count activity products and deliverables. Outcomes measure changes in people served. Outputs are within your direct control if you implement as planned. Outcomes depend on participant response and external factors beyond your influence. Both outputs and outcomes matter tremendously for different reasons, but they measure fundamentally different things that should never be confused. Outputs fall into several common categories that help you organize your thinking about what your program produces. Service delivery outputs count units of service provided to participants directly, hours of counseling delivered, days of case management provided, meals served to hungry families, and rides provided to medical appointments are all service delivery outputs. They quantify the volume of services your program delivers. Participation outputs count the number of people reached or served by your program. Participants enrolled in your program, clients served through your services, and audience members reached through your events are participation outputs. They quantify your program reach into the community. Product outputs count materials created or distributed through your program efforts. Curricula developed for training, brochures distributed to community members, reports produced for stakeholders, and resources created for participants are all product outputs. They quantify tangible deliverables your program creates. Event outputs count sessions, workshops, meetings, and other gatherings conducted by your program. trainings held for participants, support groups convened for members, and community events organized in your service area are all event outputs. They quantify programming delivered to your community. Setting output targets requires carefully balancing several important considerations to arrive at numbers that are both meaningful and achievable. Capacity-based targets consider what your resources can actually produce given real-world constraints. With your staff positions, facilities, and available budget, how many people can you realistically serve during the grant period? How many sessions can you conduct with your current capacity? Targets should always match organizational capacity to avoid promising what you cannot deliver. Need-based targets consider what volume addresses the community need you documented in your problem statement. If 2,000 people in your community need services and you can serve 200, acknowledge this openly. Targets should relate directly to the need you documented even if you cannot serve everyone. Evidence-based targets consider what dosage achieves the outcomes you are seeking. If research shows 8 sessions are needed for the intervention to be effective, committing to only 2 sessions per participant is inadequate and will likely fail. Targets should reflect effective service levels based on what the evidence tells us works. Realistic targets are achievable with effort, not purely aspirational wishes. It is much better to meet modest targets than fall dramatically short of overly ambitious ones. Funders evaluate your performance against the stated targets you committed to, so always set targets you can actually achieve. Output measurement requires clear indicators and reliable data systems that you establish before the program begins. Indicators specify precisely what you will count and how you will define each measure. Be precise in your definitions. Number of unduplicated clients receiving at least one session is much more precise than simply saying people served. Clear indicator definitions enable consistent counting across staff and over time. Data sources identify where your counts will come from in your organization. Sign-in sheets for events, service logs for appointments, database records for clients, and distribution lists for materials are all common output data sources. Identify the specific source document for each indicator you will track. Frequency determines how often you track and compile outputs during the grant period. Monthly tracking enables timely management adjustments if you fall behind targets. Annual tracking may miss problems until it is too late to correct course. Match tracking frequency to both your management needs and funder reporting requirements. Responsibility assigns who collects output data and ensures accountability for data quality. Staff conducting activities often record outputs immediately after service delivery. Data staff may compile and analyze the numbers monthly or quarterly. Clear responsibility assignment ensures data collection actually happens consistently throughout your program. Most outputs fall into a few common categories that provide useful organizing frameworks. People outputs count participants, clients, attendees, and beneficiaries. Unduplicated counts identify unique individuals served. Duplicated counts may count the same person multiple times across services. Service outputs count sessions, hours, encounters, and interventions. These measure volume of service delivery. Hours of service and number of sessions are common service outputs. Product outputs count materials, publications, resources, and tools. These measure tangible items created or distributed. Number of brochures distributed or curricula developed are product outputs. Event outputs count trainings, meetings, workshops, and gatherings. These measure programming conducted. Number of workshops held or community meetings convened are event outputs. Outputs feature prominently in grant reporting and form the foundation of your accountability to funders. Progress reports require regular output updates to funders showing what you have accomplished toward your targets. Most grants require periodic reports documenting what you have accomplished, often quarterly or semi-annually. Output data forms the core of these progress reports and demonstrates that you are implementing as promised. Performance metrics often use outputs for accountability purposes. Funders track whether you delivered what you promised in your proposal and use output achievement as a key indicator of program success. Meeting your output targets demonstrates successful program implementation and builds funder confidence. Targets versus actual reporting shows both what you committed to achieve and what you actually achieved in practice. Reports typically compare targeted outputs to actual outputs in a table format, highlighting your progress toward goals. Explanations provide essential context for variances from targets. If you fell short or exceeded your targets, explain why this happened. Contextual information helps funders understand your performance accurately and may inform program adjustments or continuation decisions. Outputs enable efficiency analysis that funders often value. Cost per output calculates what each unit costs. Total budget divided by outputs served yields cost per participant or cost per session. This helps funders compare programs and assess value. Staff productivity measures outputs per staff member. If two case managers serve similar caseloads, productivity is comparable. If one serves twice as many, there are questions to explore. Capacity utilization compares actual outputs to potential outputs. If you could serve 200 but only served 150, capacity utilization is 75%. This identifies room for expansion or need for enhanced outreach. Efficiency metrics combine outputs with resources to assess how effectively resources convert to services. Funders increasingly want to understand efficiency alongside effectiveness. While outputs emphasize quantity, quality considerations matter too. Quantity versus quality tension exists because raw numbers may miss quality. Serving many people poorly differs from serving fewer well. Consider both dimensions. Quality indicators measure how well activities were conducted. Staff qualifications, adherence to protocols, and service standards are quality indicators that complement quantity outputs. Fidelity measures assess whether the program was delivered as designed. For evidence-based programs, fidelity monitoring ensures you implemented the model correctly. High fidelity supports better outcomes. Satisfaction measures capture participant experience of services. While not outcomes, participant satisfaction indicates service quality and may predict engagement and outcomes. Presenting outputs effectively in logic models requires attention to design and clarity. Direct connection shows each activity producing identified outputs. Reviewers should see which activities produce which outputs. The connection should be logical and clear. Measurable form states outputs as countable indicators. Number of participants completing training rather than training completion. Specific countable formulations enable tracking. Realistic targets include target numbers when appropriate. Some funders want to see output targets in the logic model. 200 participants enrolled or 50 sessions delivered provides concrete commitments. Clean design organizes outputs clearly in the visual. Group-related outputs use consistent formatting and ensure outputs are visually distinct from outcomes. The logic model should be readable and clear. Several common mistakes undermine output sections. Confusing outputs with outcomes lists changes as outputs. Increased knowledge is an outcome, not an output. Number of training participants is the output. Keep these distinct. Vague outputs are nonspecific and uncountable. Awareness raised or support provided cannot be counted. Convert vague outputs to specific, countable items. Missing outputs occur when activities lack identified products. Every activity should produce something countable. If you cannot identify outputs for an activity, reconsider whether it belongs in your logic model. Unrealistic targets commit to outputs beyond capacity. Promising to serve 500 when capacity is 200 sets you up for failure. Set targets you can actually achieve. Understanding how outputs connect to outcomes is essential. Outputs enable outcomes as necessary but not sufficient conditions. You must produce outputs to achieve outcomes, but producing outputs does not guarantee outcomes. The relationship is enabling, not deterministic. Dosage matters because more outputs may produce stronger outcomes. Serving participants for longer, providing more sessions, or deeper engagement may yield better results. Research often identifies effective dosage levels. Quality affects translation because how outputs are produced matters. Poorly delivered services may produce outputs without outcomes. High-quality delivery increases the likelihood that outputs translate to outcomes. Theory of change explains why outputs lead to outcomes. The causal logic connecting what you do to what changes should be explicit. We will explore theory of change in detail in a later lesson. Here is a practical exercise to apply what you have learned. Step 1. List each activity from your logic model. Use the activities you developed in the previous lesson as your starting point. Step 2. Identify at least one countable output for each activity. What does each activity produce that can be counted? Be specific and concrete. Step 3. Set realistic target numbers for each output. Based on your resources and capacity, how many can you realistically achieve? Be ambitious but achievable. Step 4. Identify data sources for tracking each output. Where will the count come from? Sign-in sheets, service logs, distribution records, or other sources should be specified. Let us summarize the key points from this important lesson on program outputs. Outputs are defined as direct products of program activities that you produce through your work. They represent the countable, tangible, immediate results of what you do during program implementation. The key distinction to always remember is that outputs count what we did, while outcomes measure what actually changed in participants. This fundamental difference must be maintained clearly in your logic models and proposals. Confusing these two concepts is a common error that reviewers often identify quickly. Categories of outputs include people served, services delivered, products created, and events conducted during your program period. Most outputs fall into these common categories. In our next lesson, we will explore short-term outcomes, focusing on changes in learning such as awareness, knowledge, attitudes, skills, and opinions. This begins our journey through the outcome levels that demonstrate your program impact.